Good morning to the world. My name is Dairuku Sutane and I am one of the children of the corn. Sweet, delicious, nutritious corn. Why is that? Because making use of the power of corn is what allows me to nearly instantly liberalize the country of Persia from a backwater that is just waiting to be vassalized into a world-spanning empire that actively goes out and vassalizes everything not already under the thumb of a great power. So to that end, allow me to give a moment of praise to the majesty of the almighty corn kernel of truth, a power that we exploit while playing backwards countries limited by foolhardy laws that benefit only the aristocratic and clerical classes. So to the corn laws, we salute you. Naturally, the first thing you should change in a game should be the most important thing. That way, we don't forget. Let's begin by going into the Markets tab, clicking on Grains, and then switching to Encourage Exports. Next, we're going to go to the Buildings tab, and we're going to change the secondary production method from the wheat farms to citrus orchards, which immediately spikes the prices of wheat in our country to over 50%, as seen here. This is perfect for what we need, because what we need to do is piss off the already starving population of Persia so badly that they push forward a market liberal landowner that will give us access to every single law that we'll need to turn Persia from a hopeless wooden puppet into a real boy. And since we're already playing around in the Buildings tab, we might as well take this moment to privatize everything. And I mean everything. There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't privatize everything, because you want the capitalists to grow big and strong to make us lots of investment pool money, so that when we inevitably swap out to laissez-faire, they have the ability to afford all the wonderful buildings we expect them to pump out. But wait, while we're here, click on the Government Administration Production method and choose Filing Cabinets. Yeah, now while we're taking a loss as a result, look at all the bureaucracy we have piled up. This is exactly what we need later for importing grain. For now, unpause, then repause instantaneously for it to take effect. And you can see right here that we now have minus 92. But that's okay, because we can instantly import 52 from Russia to make up the deficit. The next thing we'll do is quickly click on Iraqi Ajami and pick out the textile mills to swap the secondary production method to prioritize non-luxury clothing. This run won't be building any textile mills ourselves, and all of our bureaucracy will be eaten up by other trade routes, so offsetting the standard of living hit that we'll be taking early on, even by the tiniest of margins, is pivotal. Now we're going to click on the Politics tab and the Government tab. The second most important thing you're going to want to do in every Persia run is also the most RNG dependent. You're going to want to bring the intelligentsia into your government. Yes, I know, 30 legitimacy is horrid, but you won't get many other chances to take shots at the landowners without instigating a civil war while playing as Persia. Next, we're going to go to Laws and we're going to click on Landed Voting. This action alone has cost me more runs than I'm willing to admit. Part of the reason why I'm so good at remembering what to pick when starting up a new game is because of this damn law killing so many of my previous game attempts. You could save scum this if you want to save time, and honestly, like with so many EU4 players, I wouldn't blame you. Naturally, if you don't feel the unreasonable need to save scum or restart a dozen times to get a proper start, you could always just go for the armed forces and then pump out the professional army law instead. Staying autocratic as Persia won't hurt that much. It'll just mean that banning slavery later on will make it a little more difficult. For that though, you could always just join the Austrian power bloc with creative legislature, or you could create it yourself when you become a major power to offset the stall. I would suggest against immediately putting the rural folk in and grabbing tenant farmers as your first law. The whole point of corn laws is to give us access to an early serfdom reform before 1946, and an early difficult law push like this is counteractive. It'll also mean we'll be stuck with tenant farmers instead of immediately pushing for homesteading. Let us now click on the Technology button and bring up the Society tab. It has recently been brought to my attention how unbearably powerful empiricism is for the early game literacy development. Thanks, Urknell, for setting me on the right path. As such, I've thus decided to make it my second pick after academia. Why empiricism over stock exchange? Well, that's simple. Persia is ridiculously illiterate, and we only have so many social mobility decrees to hand out. Yet, we're also going to need a lot of early game technologies to really snowball. Qualifications are also going to hamper our early game growth to the point where Mappy doesn't even work with the initial setup at all. Mappy will also eventually become more important once we settle our qualifications problems, but that 0.5% wealth bonus from empiricism dwarfs all other bonuses. For Persia, that's a meager 3% initially, but as we start correcting our standard of living through trade, that'll be pushed up to 4% or even 5% across all states for free. No decrees necessary. Then of course I pick stock exchange. I leave romanticism for later because we're not going for agrarianism, we're going for laissez-faire, and we're not pushing up prestige yet. Instead, we're going to be making an early push for railways and then an early push for line infantry. You can actually go for line infantry first or railways first. Either is fine, but you will want both as soon as possible. Next, we'll turn on the budget tab, and for the love of corn, do not touch taxes. I know the common meta for some players is to pump up to very high taxes until the 1-year grace period is over, but you will absolutely starve out your populace if you try to do that in Persia. You're already hanging on by a thread, so just do not touch the main taxes here. Instead, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to add the opium consumption tax. Then, temporarily turn on government wages to high or very high so that you can get over 900 authority. Once you place your decrees, you can turn it back down and you can go all the way to very low. From there, turn military wages to very high, as we're going to be enjoying a lot of war through this playthrough. Turn it on and off, back and forth, when you're coming to and going away from war. We're going to add social mobility to every single county excluding Urmia and Semnan. The reason why we're doing this is so that we still have just enough left over to add road maintenance to Iraqi Jami. Given our qualification issues, it's paramount that we take advantage of our 80 cost decrees to draw out the innate ability of our peasantry class as fast as possible. Next, I want you to click on the military lands and then navy so we can create a fleet in Persia. We're going to do this for later, but for now, we're going to click on Iraqi Jami, click on buildings, we're going to scroll down and we're going to put in a construction sector here. We're also going to put a construction sector here in Mazandaran. And the reason why we're doing that is so we can split them up. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but we don't have the qualifications otherwise. At the same time, we're going to go to Khorasan, we're going to put a single iron mine here, we're going to go to Tabriz, we're going to put our tooling workshop here, and then we're going to go to Kerman, we're going to put a iron mine here, and finally Isfahan, and we're going to put a single iron mine here. Now, speaking of qualifications, when playing as Persia, they are an absolute nightmare for the early game. Believe it or not, 2 buildings in a single country will result in nobody working for either building until you get your qualifications straightened out, usually using universities. Then there's farms. No farms at all. Why no farms to save the poor, starving individuals of Persia from a fate worse than death? Once more, it's very simple, my friends. We refuse to give the landowners even an ounce of power, and farms give them more power than they deserve. Don't worry though, our people won't actually starve for long. There are way better ways to deal with their suffering than giving power to the undeserving. Now that the starving masses are safely ignored, let's move on to everybody's favorite influence-earning side hustle, rivalry. Click on the diplomatic lens, click on diplomatic actions, and then click on rivalry. Doing so will show you 12 very special snowflakes to rival. We're going to pick the top 11 snowflakes to rival because we don't want to mess around with trucial states just yet. Instead, later on, we're going to be improving relations with trucial states because we're going to want to trade states with them if we're lucky enough. As for everybody else, go ham. They're just future vassals anyways. Speaking of buttering up to the trucial states, I want you to go ahead and do that right now. Also make sure to do the same with Russia, the Ottomans, and Britain. The reason why we're doing that is because we want to maintain good relations with them so they don't pick on us while we're still relatively weak. Let's now click on regional actions and then declare interest so we can declare an interest on Bombay. Now granted, Herat does look like a tasty little morsel right now, but we're actually going to wait before sitting at that dinner table. Instead, we're going to patiently wait for the interest in Bombay to go through so we can declare a transfer subject war to take Makran from Kalat. If we do it early enough, Makran will still be a vassal and not a tributary if Kalat gives in. If Kalat does not give in, however, we get a 2-for-1 special tributizing both Kalat and Makran at the same time. What a deal! Of course, before we go to war, the last thing we're going to do before unpausing is reorganizing our armies. I personally like to create a defensive force consisting of only infantry and artillery. I also like to create a lovely little offensive force like the one on the right here, consisting of as much cavalry as I can stuff in there. Also, while you're at it, make sure to bring up the mobilization tab so you can click on all of the supplements necessary so that your armies are ready for combat. Also, make sure to hire a commander, somebody who's actually good at what they're doing. Now let's finally unpause for real. We're going to wait until the very moment that Corn Laws enacts, usually around the 5th or 6th of January, and then we're going to pause immediately. We're going to correct the changes that we enacted prior to enacting Corn Laws by clicking on Market, we're going to hit on Grain, we're going to change No Priority back into place, and then we're going to go to Production and change the production for both wheat and rice farms to Maintain Single Crop. After this, we're going to address the issue of our starving populace by clicking on the trade lens, the import trade routes, and then clicking on grain. We're immediately going to click on each and every single grain import, using up all of our bureaucracy in the process. That's the reason why we got so much bureaucracy in the first place. It may not seem like much, but believe it or not, it's actually enough to keep our people from starving to death. It won't be enough to make them super duper happy, but that will come later. While we're here, click on Man of Wars and then pick the cheapest option. For me, that appears to be Russia. Then scroll down and click on your Navy and then cancel out of your trade menu. Doing so will then allow you to click on Frigate and then pick Fars. We want our ship as soon as possible, so it's always a good idea to bring up the building menu and then move that Navy base all the way to number 2 for future conquest options. Unpause again until the Bombay interest activates, then declare a transfer subject war by right-clicking on Makran, opening the diplomatic demands drop menu, then clicking on transfer subject. Again, you win no matter how this plays out, as you can also attempt to tributize Kalat and take war reparations from everyone involved if they don't surrender. If Kalat gives up, you get Makran as a vessel. If Kalat fights, you get both of them as tributaries. Regardless of how the war itself does turn out, you now get a free interest in the Bombay region. So after the war is over, immediately bring up declare interest and pick Southern Africa. The reasoning why is, for Gaza, you won't be taking it right away, but the moment that you have 15 spare infantry left to spend after you're done tributizing all of the others we intend to take on, you will want to conquer them. You'll also want to eventually conquer Transvaal and Orangi too, but it'll only happen after the British decide to stop supporting them, although you may need to check up on them periodically. If you're lucky, Britain will stop guaranteeing them by around 1845. If you're not lucky, you'll need to wait until Britain has a revolution or the AI does some weird trickery that results in one or the other countries being unprotected. As we're waiting for our interest to be placed, it's now time to begin tributizing Herat. Now, I understand you want to take land, but doing so will draw in the Russians. Merely tributizing Herat will generally keep Russia out. I also understand that by taking land, it will give you access to the journals in the eastern frontier, but trust me when I say this, none of them are worth taking early on. In fact, they penalize you greatly for daring to attempt any of them. Claiming Greater Khorasan, for instance, will generally piss off the British and you will be attacked within 10 years. Pacifying the Turkmens will also result in you getting a worthless frontier colonization law at the expense of half your dang budget. Not worth it. I suggest waiting to do either of these until you're well past finished modernizing and done colonizing, usually in the 1900s. You'll usually get the MERV mission just by taking colonial laws without doing the journals anyways. Once Herat is yours, tributize Kabul. Don't worry about the front though. You can just force Herat to open the front by right-clicking it, bringing up the Overlord actions, and then choosing Enforce Military Access and hitting OK. You can then eat Kabul with impunity. However, you could also open up another front without enforcing access simply by declaring on Kandahar right after you've declared on Kabul. Just note that this does not always work, as you can lose the front when they surrender. Finally, if you didn't get Kalat the first time around, once the truce is over, eat them too, because Persia needs food. Ally with Russia in the early game if the opportunity arises and you're not going for the Austrian power bloc. If not, butter up deeply with Britain and eventually try to join their bloc if they'll let you. Doing so will get you immediate access to vassalization, and eventually they'll take Market Unification 3, which gives you access to their market for 0 cost. If not, you'll have to wait until you become a major power to create your own bloc where you can take either creative legislature or vassalization according to your tastes. Once the one ship is finally built, we're going to create a one-troop army to function as our Marines. I personally prefer to use the line infantry to make our Marine force as strong as possible. Once that's done, we're going to go down to South Africa and we're going to declare a conquest war on Gaza. Once the war with Gaza finally does come up, make sure to send a naval force, including that one troop that we've created, to function as our Marines. It shouldn't take too long for them to come down here, but the moment that they do finally land, you'll notice that Gaza is instantaneously taken regardless. There is no battle whatsoever. One final hint for those of you who went the landed voting route and you got lucky enough to grab a few successes that put you over 20%. Swap out the intelligentsia to get your legitimacy back to 100 for a faster enactment rate and less revolutionaries. Don't forget, you can always swap the intelligentsia back in later if you're in danger of a legislation failure that would cause the law to automatically fail without being backed. Well, that's about it for my Persia startup guide. I'm actually going to be trying something different than my usual tutorial videos for the next video. I'm going to be playing the actual game and showcasing why I go through so much trouble to start up like this every single time I make a run. It'll definitely be a lot less dry and a lot less informative, but it'll be a little more goofy, so hopefully it's not too jarring for any repeat listeners out there. Anyways, thank you for watching, please like and subscribe to help me out, and remember, hail Hydra Cat.